Well, it's my first time here at a conference of this type. And I've been talking to some people, and if I knew what you are about, I think that I have modified my talk into a certain direction. But anyway, I will present you what I have prepared. Talking about Amazonian shamanism, we have, first of all, to think of the Amazon. And remember, the Amazon is one of the richest biological diversities places on Earth, with hundreds or thousands of, well, in fact, millions of insects, species, 40,000 plants, 3,000, thousands of species of many kinds. But what some people do not know is that it is also one of the great cultural diversity places on Earth, with many, many different linguistic families, each family with many, many dozens of languages. So in fact, in the Amazon, we have something like 330 extant languages of 25 linguistic families and 50 isolates, which we don't know where they are coming from. And we always think of Europe as a very diverse, linguistically diverse. You travel a little bit, you have to change language all the time. But compared to the Amazon, Europe is quite poor. You have basically one huge family language, and the Europeans, and then you have the Finno-Ugric here. Then we have a little place there in the Basque, and then you have the the Turkic Altaic in Turkey. So it is also a place with enormous centers of cultivation. We always think in the Americas of the Andes, and we think of Mesoamerica, but also the Amazon, extremely diverse domestications of plants. And it has been said that the Amazon could not sustain large populations because there was not enough protein. All this argument is just falling down completely because we have areas of huge cultivation. This is in the Bolivia Amazon, and you have rice fields and channels. They were able to cultivate, and they were able to trap fish and so on. And in the Amazon, we have the richest, the best soils in the world. And not because nature is giving us those rich soils, because in the Amazon, the topsoil is very, very thin. All it is in the biomass is up in the trees. But there is an anthropogenic soil made by human beings through thousands of years. In fact, the Amazon, they have the richest soils in the world. If you put together all the black soils, you have a surface equally to the whole of France. And we have beautiful ceramics and all over the Amazon. And when Carvajal Orellana came down the Amazon in 1542, Carvajal was writing about all these cities and all these fantastic ceramics and how there were cities all around, both sides of the Amazon. His book was published only several hundred years later, and everybody thought this is just legend. It is not that true, because the Amazon, very soon, when La Condamine went in the 18th century, it was already depopulated. Everywhere, the Amazon is mostly, you don't have any stones there, But as soon as you have stones in the rivers, you have petroglyphs. And there, in fact, you find petroglyphs all over. And there have been now, for sure, that there were millions of people living in the Amazon. And there were networks of cities connecting each other. Our idea of the Amazon has changed completely in the, and the discoveries are coming one after the other. This is only very, very few years ago, 13 kilometers of rock art in the Colombian Amazon. And I have been in touch with Professor Jose Iriarte from Exeter University. I am somehow also related to Exeter University, showing me fantastic paintings. So, and just last week, this came out. They found, using this technology called LIDAR, you find settlements with pyramids, 22 meters high pyramids. Our idea of the Amazon is going to change radically, completely. But what happened in the Amazon, like happened in all the Americas, this is from the Aztecs. 95 to 98% of the population of the Americas died within 150 years of contact. Over 100 million people perished in a very short time. So, and we lost all the knowledge. In fact, the Mesoamerican libraries were burned, by the church. So we have no idea what it was there. And one of the things that people do not think of is that the Amazon is also one of the places with the greatest concentration of mind-altering plants. This is really, there are hundreds probably of mind-altering plants, and each indigenous tribe, they have their own plants. Some of them they have now spread all over, but some of them they have their own secret plants which are specific for them. But this is all over the America. We cannot understand the Americas without reference to the sacred plants or psychoactive plants or psychedelic plants. I don't like that term. I prefer to use sacred plants. And in fact, when Columbus came, the second voyage to Española, what is now Santo Domingo in Haiti, he had with him a friar, Ramon Pané, and let him be in there for 4 years. Pick it up later. He learned the language of the Taíno Indians, and in fact, the very first book written in the Americas on a European language was about a sacred plant. It was about an Adelantera peregrina called cojoba. Dennis McKenna, a very good friend, who told me that, what a mistake Columbus made when he brought to Europe tobacco. If he had brought cojoba, it would be 5-methoxy-DMT, bufotenin, it will be a completely different civilization. So an Adelantera peregrina in the north, an Adelantera colubrina in the south. And we have both trees, we have a botanical garden in southern Brazil, we have both trees growing there, beautiful trees. And then, of course, tobacco, the two species, but there are hundreds of varieties of tobacco. And North America, the indigenous tribes use many different psychoactive plants. Also in Mesoamerica, of course, Xochipilli was the king of, the god of flowers. In fact, was the god of hallucinogenic plants or god of sacred plants. And of course, you all know Maria Sabina, Paul Stamets. I just took this photo. I was with him last week. And he showed how the use of psychoactive mushrooms is very old. I mean, in fact, it goes back all the way to Tassili in northern Algeria 7,000 years ago. And then, of course, in the Greek mythology, we have it also. Persephone's, Demeter giving Persephone a magical mushroom to come back, to bring back the spring and so on. So, peyote being used in North America, well, first in Mexico, Mesoamerica, then spread all over North America, in Indians, even though it was prohibited. Peyote goes back probably 4,000 or 5,000 years back. We have archaeological evidence. But it was declared diabolic because if ingested, the person was accused of witchcraft, a crime comparable to cannibalism. It could be executed for it. And in fact, there was a persecution of sacred plants from the very beginning. The Aztecs used also oleuki, Ribera corimbosa, many different species of morning glories, and species of Brugmansia, previously called Datura arborea. And again, the same thing. It was used for divination with diabolic intent. It is called borrachero, floripondio, or campana, given that the flower looks like what? A bell. They use them to cure persistent illness. Either they get healthy or die with it. It is also used to become maestros and learn the art of witchcraft. Learn to become maestros. I will come back to this idea. Of course, as I said, Amazonian Indians know many different plants. Without curare, one of the ingredients in curare, which they use for killing animals, open heart operation, it will be impossible today. So they found chemicals which are doing miracles. But again, the sacred plants, one of the very important one is Virola califola or Virola longiolata, which contains 5-methoxy-DMT, a very, very powerful substance used by many indigenous tribes, among them the Yanomami Indians, who are being persecuted and their villages burned. And it's really horrible what is happening right now with the Yanomami, especially in Brazil, but also in Venezuela. This book, if you make a note, this is a really important book. This is for me one of the most important books written about in anthropology in the last 15 years. And these are the words of a shaman, of Daviko Panawa, who talks about his culture and the origin of his knowledge. And he says, I did not learn to think about the things of the forest by setting my eyes on paper skins, on books. I saw them for real by drinking my eldest breath of life with the yacoana powder they gave me. So it is yacoana, the powder, the source of their knowledge. We do not become shamans by eating game or the food from our gardens, but through the trees of the forest. It is yacoana powder, the sap exuded by yacoana heat trees, that reveal the spirit's words and spreads them far and wide. Ordinary people are deaf to them, but by becoming shamans, we can hear them clearly. Because Daviko Panawa, this book is like a reverse anthropology. He's looking at us, and so he calls the garimperos, the earth eaters, and us, the Western civilization, we are the people of the merchandise. And white people do not know these things. They are satisfied with thinking that we are more ignorant than they are just because they know how to produce machines and paper and tape recorders. But the sacred plants are absolutely crucial. For instance, this is taken by Schultes in the Rio Paraná, in the Vacuna. For the kids, when they reach puberty, they are given Kaapi, a very sacred and potent plant, so that they are able to travel and see their own mythology, that they can see for themselves that all this, what the elders say, it is true. My story with this kind of plants goes back to 1971. I met Terence McKenna. We were young. He was 26, I was 25. And I met him in Colombia. I was having holidays. I lived 7 years in Spain, 7 years in Norway, 32 years in this country. But anyway, I met Terence, and then he was writing his first book, The Invisible Landscape. We were together for 2.5 months. And during this time, we took for the first time Yagé. We do it together. Yagé. And Yagé is the vine, the Banisteriopsis vine, with the leaves of Diplopterus cabrerana, another vine of the same family, Malpighiaceae, very closely related to ayahuasca, which is much more well-known, but ayahuasca is Banisteriopsis caapi, and then the Rubiacea from the coffee family, Psychotria viridis. And you can see here, more or less, the distribution of Yagé and ayahuasca. So my first experience was Yagé. I'm myself from the Colombian Amazon. So that was my experience. And my second experience was in 1979. I went back to Florencia, where I was born, in the Caquetá. I had my second Yagé experience, this time in 1979. In between, I was doing field work. I was studying, in chemistry and studying anthropology, studying many things because the experience was so enormous that I have to process this. I went back, and my second experience, and for me, was the discovery of Amerindian epistemology, how the Indians see the world, completely different. And I will come back to that later. So I wanted to make a film. He died before I was able to get to Colombia. Terence told me, go to Peru, there is a tradition. I made this film, Don Emilio and His Little Doctors. You can find it on YouTube, and it was shown here in Finnish television in 1981, I think. And I spent several summers going through all the preparation, taking ayahuasca during the whole field work, during making the film and then doing field work. And it was Don Emilio who told me about that ayahuasca is un doctor. is a doctor, is a teacher. And tobacco is a teacher, and caliandra is a teacher, Toe is a teacher, and there are many, many, many teachers. So the idea of the concept of plants as teachers, which I published in 1984, it came in also in German, French, and Spanish. And then I did I gathered so much material this time, and I took my doctoral dissertation in Stockholm with work on vegetalismo, the mestizo Peruvian Amazona. So yahe, ayahuasca, is a huge vine. This is a little vine that we have in our garden in southern Brazil. But in the forest, a vine can be 30, 40 meters high. It can be this thick. It flowers usually in the canopy. And this is, I was doing field work with the Barquinha, one of the churches that use ayahuasca in Brazil. And this was one plant, 600 kilos. And it was harvested. It was not taken the whole plant. When I was doing field work in the Sibundoy Valley in Colombia in the 86, I found the same idea. The Sibundoy, the Kamsai, and the Ingano Indians, they say that the garden is the garden of science. So again, the same idea. These plants are teachers. And the way to do it is you have to keep a diet, you have to be in isolation, and I did it several times. I did it with mestizo, I did it with Shipibo, I did it also with the Kashinawa. I wanted to understand what are they talking about. I spent some time with the Shipibo. This was in 1986 in the Rio Ucayali, and these are very famous for the science. Now everybody knows this kind of work. And in 83, I went to see Dennis McKenna, who is Terence's brother, a scientist. He was then writing his doctoral dissertation as well, discovering that really this combination of harmine, DMT and harmine, it is indeed what Boo Homstead had suggested, that the harmine will deactivate the monoamine oxidase, so that the DMT will travel through the blood-brain barrier and go into the synapses. And then in 1985, I organized the very first symposium on ayahuasca and yahe in Bogota during a big conference. And there is Dennis and Guillermo Arevalo, who later became also a very famous shaman. And we gathered plants for botanical dimensions. Terence created a botanical garden in Hawaii, and we gathered plants there. Let me see how many minutes I have, yeah. And so this is Terence and his previous wife, and he had a beautiful garden. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by wild pigs. But now our garden in Florianopolis, it is his garden in a way. It's a continuation. We have now about 300-400 species of, And then it was Dennis who introduced me to Pablo Amaringo. And Pablo was doing this kind of landscapes in very cheap paper and watercolor. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I noticed that he had a very good memory. And I asked him, do you remember the visions that you had? Because he told me he had been a shaman, a vegetalista. He said, I remember. And then it was this first vision, this one. And I understood, this is, for an anthropologist, this is a golden source. Because then we started a correspondence, and I was asking him about the spirits. He was making paintings. And so the huge information that came back with every of these paintings, huge information. There are pages of descriptions of each of these. And look at the futuristic cities, which are, and the UFOs. I was, in December, I was in Esalen in California, a conference of UFOs where I presented these kind of things. By the way, UFO is one of the very common motifs that you have when taking ayahuasca, and so on. So this is the kind of work, and you have in the exhibition, in the VIP, you have these original paintings. They are going now next year to a museum, le Quai Branly Jean Chirac Museum in Paris. And I published this book in 1991, The Religious Iconography of a Peruvian Shaman. And I have a website where you can browse the paintings in my collection. And then I said I created a center in southern Brazil with my wife, with a tremendous advisory board. We have some of the best people in the world, and where we have the varieties of Bacillus capi, many different plants, Diplopterus, we have many, of course, Psychotria viridis, we have tobacco, the Brugmansia, Datura, Inoxia, species, this is the Caliandra, the big lupuna. This tree is about perhaps 15 meters high. It's only 20 years old, but this is a baby one. Because the real one, I don't have here the photo, are gigantic in the Amazon. You can go 40 meters, it's just extraordinary. Very important tree for the Mesoamerican and also for the Amazonian Indians. It spreads very easily. So if we die and we disappear, this tree alone will reforestate the whole area. Then we have, of course, all the stimulants, the coffee, cacao, mate, and so on. And I just came last week. I was in England, and I was with Paul Stammet. You all know the mycologist, Wade Davis, and Mark Plotkin, Bruce Damer, who is one of the presented a new theory of origin of life, and Manolo, who is a specialist in Anatra, and Dennis McKenna, who have been friends and doing field work together for many, many, many years. But anyway, we think of our culture. Look at that. Our relationship with plants, that's the beginning. We ate the forbidden fruit. And then Noah put a lot of animals in the ark, but he didn't put any plants, Strange. So the relationship with the plants has been, with Christianity, has been very problematic. We know that the Germanic people had the Yggdrasil, but there was a systematic destruction of the forest, of the big trees of the Germanic people, including the Estonians. I had another slide, didn't bring it, and so on. So, and if you go to the Greeks, also their relationship with plants, it was not completely. There was Theophrastus, but it was like an exception. Socrates said, "Forgive me, my friend, I'm devoted to learning. Landscapes and trees have nothing to teach me. Only the people in the city can do that." So it's strange, that the Greeks had not this very deep relationship with plants. But this is changing. Now there are more and more publications, extraordinary publications by scientists. For instance, Francis Allais, "I dream of a botany that could determine itself autonomously, according to its own rules, no longer lagging behind animal or human physiology, thinking about the plant itself as an original form of life, as a model with respect to autonomy and the restoration of the environment. Botany could regain its place at the center of the life sciences." And I don't read the whole thing, but so the plants are extremely sensitive, respond to environmental signals, touch, sight, etc. And then fantastic books are coming. This is by Monica Galliano, another book that I really recommend. Monica is coming with us. It's going to be to southern Brazil. She's a scientist, a real scientist with hundreds of very scientific papers. But she said these are messages from the plants. The plants are giving her instructions about how to perform scientific experiments. Now the Amazonian and the tradition, many traditions of societies are animistic. That means that life, everything is intelligent. We are not the only one. We used to think, are we alone? We think, are we alone? My goodness, we are surrounded by millions and millions of species, and inside us with the microbiome, we live in an intelligent planet. And in indigenous cultures, nature speaks. The human voice is in an oral culture is always to some extent participatory with the voices of wolves, wind, waves, participant that is with the encompassing discourse of an animated earth. And he says also, David Abraham, there is no element of the landscape that is definitely void of expressive resonance and power. Any movement may be a gesture, any sound may be a voice, a meaningful utterance. So animism is to a great extent is the recognition that there is mind in life, that there is subjectivity in everything which exists in nature. And because the Western way of looking at things since Descartes, in which he divided into res cogita and res extensa, and we have the subject and the object, and very important to be objective, and the whole science is about objectivity and measurement and replication and so on. But the way of seeing things in the animistic societies, it is interpretation. It's intersubjectivity. It is relational epistemology. And knowledge really is not looking at things, but transforming into things, getting in touch with things. And I've heard some of the talks talking, very, very similar ideas. So it's how to get into nature. And how to get into nature, I just finished here, is how to know the plants, for instance. It is the only way to experience mind in plants is to silence the human apparatus that deal with concepts and just feel, observe, listen, be open to pure presence without self-reflection. And we can find it everywhere, including in the little herb outside, here. So, all right. This is my home in Florianopolis, and thank you very much.